pulling pieces out the sky, pulling scene from out my mind. I'm just living that life though. Lock and key, ballin' chain, psycho. Better know it, nigga, better know it. I lock and loaded my revival. Lock and key, ballin' chain, psycho. Better know it, nigga, better know it. Just living that life though. Lock and key, ballin' chain, psycho. Better know it, nigga, better know it. I lock and loaded my revival. Lock and key, ballin' chain, psycho. Better know it, nigga, better know it. I start pulling pieces out the sky, pulling scene from out my mind. Get crazy, Scorsese, John Singleton, and Hughes brothers for my line. Roll a Spike Lee joint, about to make a movie, show you how the world truly a pile of poverty. Mold the pottery, a melting pot to be destroyed in confusion. Action, shoot, red dot for the court, and now that dot for the target. Target black, hit him up, numerous shots with the fofo, it's going down. Down on how the homies trained us, down on luck, down on paper, down state, down on haters, living the way that they say grandma and mine never raised us. We just living that life though. Lock and key, ballin' chain, psycho. Better know it, nigga, better know it. I lock and loaded my revival. Lock and key, ballin' chain, psycho. Better know it, nigga, better know it. Just living that life though. Lock and key, ballin' chain, psycho. Better know it, nigga, better know it. I lock and loaded my revival. Lock and key, ballin' chain, psycho. Better know it, nigga, better know it. Out tears in the jungle, see you alive as soon as your pride making an absence. In a rock in a hard place where my family raised me. I grew with the gap is, I grew with the back is. Your lifestyle bringing the package, personality in your fabric. Matter over mind, never mind if you got mind enough to maintain a ration. Made a madness, the lifestyle made me grab it. Perspire your pain and passion, aspire, bring them past it. I am the dream you napping. That's cause they made my checks up and away, get at it. Bottom to the top, nigga, basement addict. All I wanna do is rock, nigga, basement addicts. All they wanna do is stop. What? My pace to have it, from silver to plastic on scroll. Soon as my habitat mode, from suburb to city, the pity, the poverty. I just adapted to show to the stars in the moon till I'm all in that. Dollar for the Lord, he ain't calling back. All I wanna do is write, what's wrong with that? So I'm marching on with our target on the march 50 songs. Just living that life though. Living that life though. Can turn you upon or string you along. The chain of the psycho. Hope you think of what I know. Taking a stride though. And pray with your Bible. This world is taking a dive. He's taking a ride to make it alive. To say that it's fine. Cause we just living that life though. Lock and key, ballin' chain, psycho. Better know it, nigga, better know it. I lock and loaded my revival. Lock and key, ballin' chain, psycho. Better know it, nigga, better know it. Just living that life though. Lock and key, ballin' chain, psycho. Better know it, nigga, better know it. I lock and loaded my revival. Lock and key, ballin' chain, psycho. Better know it, nigga, better know it.
I ain't got no time.
You was my girl, but I ain't got time for a bitch. I cannot wind it down with a bitch. I won't waste my time with a bitch. Gotta go and get mine. I'm on my grind and this bitch won't stop, can't block my shine. I'ma get money all on my mind and shit. Gotta put a dime on wrist.
These niggas don't know me. I don't hard to rock, I ain't Kobe. Half a mil split it all with my brodies. We empty the safe, then reloaded. They holding my spot. I was down, I climbed straight to the top. Niggas tried and they played and got shot. Better duck when you hear that.
I'm on some new shit. When we fuck, get it wet like a pulpit. She gon' fuck for Chanel or that Gucci. She bout action, she ready for movies. If she fucking a Zoe, it's a Zuby. Just a vid, bitch, my sweater is Coogee. If you lost me right now, who you losing? I want love on these hoes, we can choose them.
Hear my voice, all these bitches go crazy. I get two of these niggas be lazy. I turn pro, all these niggas to training. I started my own campaign. All black bottles, we sipping champagne. Celebrate after we break the bank. Pull up, babe, that bitch give me brain. When we fuck, she be grabbing my chain. God damn.
Back off, little bitch, back off. I'm on my grind, I can't slack off. I run it back, no need backup. All I know is how to get them racks up.
She like, why we can't never build? I got no time to fucking chill, baby. I'm really chasing these fucking bills. Just want me bring home another
my
meal.
girl, but I ain't got time for a bitch. I cannot wind it down with a bitch. I won't waste my time with a bitch. Gotta go and get mine. I'm on my grind and this bitch won't stop, can't block my shine. I'ma get money all on my mind and shit. Gotta put a dime on wrist.
These niggas don't know me. I don't hard to rock, I ain't Kobe. Half a mil split it all with my brodies. We empty the safe, then reloaded. They holding my spot. I was down, I climbed straight to the top. Niggas tried and they played and got shot. Better duck when you hear that.
Leak these he know him.
Nah, juice, a nigga don't know him.
Load them sticks and get ready to blow.
Say less, my nigga, I'm blowing.
Hit up check till that nigga is smoke.
10-4, I know check he on go.
We gon' bend the block, yeah, I know they a foe.
Fuck, nigga, we gon' triple the scope.
If they in my phone, you know I'm on go. All my niggas on your block now. Bending your bitch, yeah, now you get tricky. Drop the top, let the shots out. Niggas be talking like they be outside, but when we slide, never pop out. Little them cars, you ready to ride. When you see me, ain't no cop out.
Back off, little bitch, back off. I'm on my grind, I can't slack off. I run it back, don't need backup. All I know is how to get them racks up.
Keep like why we can't never build. I got no time to fucking chill, baby. I'm really chasing these fucking bills. Just want me bring home
You
another
was my girl, but I ain't got time for a bitch. I cannot wind it down with a bitch. I won't waste my time with a bitch. Gotta go and get mine. I'm on my grind and this bitch won't stop, can't block my shine. I'ma get money all on my mind and shit. Gotta put a dime on my wrist.
These niggas don't know me. I don't hard to rock, I ain't Kobe. Half a mil split it all with my brody. We empty the safe, then reload it. They holding my spot. I was down, I climbed straight to the top. Niggas tried and they played, they got shot. Better jump when you hear that.
I had to break the bitch down. 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 Ain't no half stepping, ain't no second guessing. Yeah, you know I hold it down. Say I had to break the bitch down. 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 Ain't no half stepping, ain't no second guessing. Yeah, you know I hold it down. Say I had to break the bitch down. I had to break the bitch down. Say bitch, I came in the game just to do my own thing. Yeah, I need a piece of change because a youngin' off the chain. Yeah, I'm a dog, yeah, I'm a dog, yeah, you know I rip insane. Like a beaker got the flame, so don't speak on my name. Yeah, the swag so major because I've been through some pain. I think I need a trench coat because I've been through the rain. See, I'm an all-star player. See, me and you ain't the same. See, I'm hard to contain. 23 like LeBron James. Yeah, I had to run it up, had to get in my...
I got receipts, I got deposits. What you did to me, yes, I'm positive of one thing. No loyalty, you spill the tea. It got back to me, ooh, I'ma be honest. This on promise, you in the gutter, I'm chasing commas. I walk in, turn around. You and your friends always look me up and down with a fake smile. Cause you're stirring up the pot, stirring up the pot. Always been a hater, nothing but a afterthought. Oh Lord, tell me why, oops, yeah, I forgot. Haters mad what I have and it all cost a lot. So you pop a molly, pop a molly, pop a molly, pop. I might have to catch your body if you ain't gon' ever stop. And the beat's so sick, make you wanna milli rock, ay, wanna milli rock, ay, wanna milli rock. Too much, I'm not trying to be the judge, but I think I have more than enough. Cause you won't budge, no you like it tough, I'm done. I know you think you shot the winning gun, but I told you I'm not the one. I'm not the one, no I'm not the one. You shady AF, you shady AF. No, shady AF, you shady AF. You so shady, thinking you can play me. All of you flex the chains in your necks, but none of you people can phase me. Think I want your man, I'ma have to pass, no that mess ain't right, that's the mess I don't like. You played the beat, I made the beat, got these people so shook, now they afraid of me. About to drive up the cost just like big oil. Breezy wasn't lying when he said y'all wasn't loyal. Stirring up the pot, stirring up the pot. 5-star hotel while you sleeping on a cot. And the beat's so cold, but it burn like it's hot. I get that concern for your health, but I'm not. Try to backroom deal me like Harvey Weinstein. I don't like cheap thrills if you know what I mean. Try to outcast me, I'm so fresh and clean. Y'all ain't heard of toxic, better ask somebody. Too much, I'm not trying to be the judge, but I think I had more than enough. Cause you won't budge, no you like it tough, I'm done. I know you think you shot the winning gun, but I told you I'm not the one. shady, yeah. I'm not the one, yeah. Baby, yeah. I'm not baby, yeah. Shady, yeah. Shady, yeah. Too much. I'm not trying to be the judge, but I think I have more than enough. 'Cause you won't budge. No, you like it tough. I'm done. I know you think you shot the winning gun, but I told you I'm not the one. I'm not the one. No, I'm not the one. Shady, yeah. You shady, yeah. I'm not the one. You shady, yeah. You shady, yeah.
Never sell my soul. I got my respect. I got birth control. You used to make my music for the strippers on the pole. You go ahead and hate them about to dig another hole. Everybody walking around with their chest on swole. Until I catch them slipping, sliding like an Eskimo. Pour me up a drink, I'm about to swing an episode. It's fucking with these Judases, but boy, you never know. Martin Little Mexico, they about to plug me up. Blue filter, Walking Dead, and why they dug me up. Smoking one, why I'm rolling one, that's double dutch. Looking for a big old bubble butt, double cup, double cup. Yeah, I said it tastes like bubble gum. Burger said it'll hit your ass, it's like a sucker punch. Won't try to lie in front like you don't want you something. Popo knocking on my door like, what the fuck? It just me, myself, and I. Don't need nobody else. Coming 909, find me in my double cup. I don't ever leave home without my double cup. You looking for a double up and come and fuck with us. I got my double cup. 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 I got smoking super duper. Don't pass me no hookah. I got this here Ruger. Yeah, I bought it for intruders. I just came back from the future. Oh shit, now I'm Looper. Fuck you in your Uber. I'm the driver and the shooter. Pull up in the SUV or on the motor scooter. Unclogging the pipeline, call me Roto-Rooter. Sipping on Kahlua. Hate to do it to you. Treat you like a shish kebab and throw you on the skewer. Coming down on my high like a parachuter. Sarah Taro Farrow Gama out in Chattanooga. Fill me to the brim again in Boston, Massachusetts. Percocet and Pua all way down to Aruba. Drink myself into a stupor. Sure they ass is stupid. I'm in love with double cup like I got shot by Cupid. Double up your situation ain't really shit to it. Double cup for everybody singing, no let's do it. It's just me, myself, and I. Don't need nobody else. Coming 909, find me in my double cup. I don't never leave home without my double cup. You looking for a double up and come and fuck with us. I got my double cup. 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 I got my double cup.
Artist. Underworld. If you don't know what it's hitting for, I'm finna show you right now. Pull up. I told niggas about trying me, nigga. Huh? Tell a nigga pull up. So somebody tell a nigga pull up. Please. Tell a nigga pull up. You're not a friend to me. Real niggas know who's down and who the enemy. Tell a nigga pull up. And you'll remember me trying to put on the front for what you pretend to be. Pull up. So if you send for me, you better know what they doing and have the same energy. Pull up. So if you send for me, you better know what they doing and have the same energy. I'm switching, I'm swerving, I'm driving in the fast lane. Kid, the way I'm coming off, I'm showing off. I'm not the same kid, but you know me. Still slide where your grams live, not with the small talk. I reloaded and I blame shit, know nothing of what you claim. My niggas don't only bang, my niggas that twist their fingers cause they a part of the gang. But the fam, KKK, shit won't be the same. Most styles turn shit to mayhem. It's spices that bring you pain. Case smash is TNT. If I blow, I take out 4 blocks. And if you want war, let me know, I'm at your doorknob. And if I don't get you, them goons that come and get you. Got butchers that's nice with blades, sharpshooters that's sharp with pistols, Jamaicans that hold machetes. They use that to come and get you. Take your shit like a man. If you running, that's an issue. I'm digging to put you under the world. Nigga, I'm digging to put you under the world, and that's official. Tell a nigga, pull up. You're not a friend to me. Real niggas know who down and who the enemy. Tell a nigga, pull up. And you'll remember me trying to put on the front for what you pretend to be. Tell a nigga, pull up. So if you send for me, you better know what they doing and have the same energy. Tell a nigga, pull up. So if you send for me, they better know what they doing and have the same energy. Tell a nigga, pull up.
I'ma go klepto on it. I'm a dog, I pound till it's blue. I'ma do the crip walk on it. It ain't no fun that my homie can't have none. I'ma go Nate Dogg on it. She bad, I pray for that ass. I be doing that crap flow on it. Go down low, limbo on it. Then I'm switching up the tempo on it. He ain't wanna pay her rent. Shit, I'ma go spend those hundreds. I'ma dive all in it. Get baptized in it. She ain't had dick like this in a minute. I'ma hit her with the curl. Yeah.
She a 10, 10, 10 on my list. I put 10, 10, 10 on my wrist. Pull a bad bitch. That's a bad bitch. She got that wet drip, I said, wet drip. She got that wet drip, I said, wet drip. She got that wet drip, she got that wet drip. She got that wet drip, she got that wet drip. Lick, super drippy, super freaky. Make him sign a non-disclosure, got it. Keep these biggest secrets. John, if you in it, little baby, slow up. My niggas important, they don't do no front. Show him he only get loose in the whip. Mrs. Lewinsky gets hot in the script. I call him daddy, he call me baby. Before he eat it, he saying it's grace. It's so amazing, it don't get no better. Tell my ass nigga that he get me wet. Winning whatever he with it, I'm with it. Calling Katrina, that pussy be dripping. Cautious when wet, might have him tripping. That pussy be slipping. She a 10, 10, 10 on my list. I put 10, 10, 10 on my wrist. Pull a bad bitch. That's a bad bitch. She got that wet drip, I said, wet drip. She got that wet drip, I said, wet drip. She got that wet drip, she got that wet drip. She got that wet drip, she got that wet drip.
She got a bad body, she got that juicy booty. I got that Uzi girl. Give me that Looney Tunes. She got that whirlwind, monsoon, tornado on that ass. Hit it, want it, so I scoop the Captain Saber on that ass. She got that wet. She got that drip. She got that, she got that good shit. She got that thank you, ma'am. I'm trying to handle it. She going in on the gram. Sometimes I can't stand this bitch.
She a 10, 10, 10 on my list. I put 10, 10, 10 on my wrist. Pull a bad bitch. That's a bad bitch. She got that wet drip, I said, wet drip. She got that wet drip, I said, wet drip. She got that wet drip, she got that wet drip. She got that wet drip, she got that wet drip.
They be hating from afar. They Baby looking, trying to figure out exactly who we are. Who we are, got me feeling like a star. Celebrity, celebrity, star, celebrity. Got me feeling like a star. Celebrity, celebrity, star, celebrity. They be hating from afar. They be looking, trying to figure out exactly who we are. Who we are, got me feeling like a star. Celebrity, celebrity, star, celebrity. Got me feeling like a star. Celebrity, celebrity, star, celebrity.
I'm a star, you a star, but we don't sit in the same sky. Melanin activated. Now I'm using my third eye, watching these haters hating. Another nigga that made it. How you want it? Give 100 while everyone else is shading. I work the weight when you hate. While your career is fading, overstanding knowledge at its best. It's amazing, I overthink to cool my mind. I roll it and blaze it and think of some fantastic shit about you hating. New car, new crib, you get it? I'm impatient, hands down I be on top, I'm a boss. And they hate it, I floss and show off because I'ma pay it. I got money in the bank and I still got money to play with. So please don't hold your tongue, be like Neo and just say it gently like I'm the one or not the one to be played with. You choose, this is chess, your move, checkmate, you lose. You a fake, no debater, filling my shoes, nigga.
They be hating from afar. They be looking, trying to figure out exactly who we are. Who we are, got me feeling like a star. Celebrity, celebrity, star, celebrity. Got me feeling like a star. Celebrity, celebrity, star, celebrity.
Serious, man. I'm always on my D. I'm Adrian, what up? Yeah. Seen this mean kind of stuff, I'm really honest. I feel like used to get along when I'm just being honest. Don't wanna have a problem, son, step back. Cause I ain't falling back just because you say you strap fast. In life, I was dealt a bad hand. Y'all bred me a warrior that's able to withstand. No preservatives, alcohol, or drugs. For the honesty alone, no hatred, it's all love. For space fillers, and I don't use the word nigga. Michael Jackson rhymes, each one of these a thriller. Fatally honest, cause son of deception killer. I take no bribes, hate lies, no ties to anything not solid. I solemnly promise, no progression, only progression for what profit. That we may be able to stand in the sandwich just because we live for the truth and we did it out of love.
Yo, I'm always on my ding. I'm always on my grind. I'm always on my ding. And know I'm out of darkness that comes my way, cause got my shine.
I'm sick of that same song and dance in a circle like the hokey poke. No longer go for the okie doke. I'm on my dean as a man for my fam. Career change cause J.O.B. means just over broke. Cause we know the hope's gone when the streets are grew up on. Scripted, unpredicted, the storm, my people you've been warned. Profiled and harassed by police in uniform. Pray for the spirit of the culture to be reborn. Rappers seeing me's like seeing a unicorn. Claim to be the boss but you're down to your knees doing porn. You can form but I won't take no shorts. I ain't no coon. Not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but it ain't no fork and it ain't no spoon. I stay tuned like the tube all up in your homes. Grind like arthritic bones. Dean of the students, now this movement will be melanized. And feel this revolution, whether or not it's televised.
Yo, always on my ding. Always on my grind. I'm always on my ding. And know I'm out of darkness that comes my way, cause got my shine.
No time to sleep, sleep will get you killed. Black face in these streets, not a minstrel film. On my dean like a college for knowledge, we getting dollars, so we shine like we polish. Sure this thing turn real. Voyage through the past persecution, this new problem. Born in the past and the future, that's new tolerance, new algorithms. Love when the G's home. Plus I'm getting dough, guess it's tough in the genome. Don't chase paper, swing the axe to the tree gone. IRS paying tax, that's a street loan. Can't kinda for dollars, that's blue collar. Don't go to jail for white collars, that's true robbers. Players couldn't score on my goal if they played soccer. Never won an Oscar, never won a Grammy. Yeah, I feel I won when I'm looking at my family. Yeah, I feel I won when I'm looking at my family.
Shimmy, make that cocoa pop. Throw it in a circle for me, let me see it drop. Take it to the floor, I might get on top. Make that ass shimmy for me, show me what you got. Let me see that shimmy, shimmy, shimmy all, ayy. We be lit and talking shit, that's how we parlay. Make that ass shake, this a party. I just wanna see you shimmy, shimmy all, ayy. Let me see that shimmy, shimmy. Got me like gimme, gimme. Now usually I'm not that freaky, but that Henny in me. Now tell that boost to pipe it down, I could have Remy in me. Ain't get the strap and have to write it like a Hemi in me. Wonder what Fendi give me, wonder what Gucci send me. And if I sell it, ain't no telling what this coochie give me. I bend it over, shake it, that's that hoochie in me. Don't get it twisted, I'm a queen, so ain't no goofy in me. I got my girls, they with me, they like to do the splits. Get your money, ho, might leave with a nigga, bitch. I like all my niggas rich, selling dope and hitting licks. Treat them when I do my tricks, shimmy, shake it on his dick. Let me see that shimmy, shimmy, make that cocoa pop. Throw it in a circle for me, let me see it drop. Take it to the floor, I might get on top. Make that ass shimmy for me, show me what you got. Let me see that shimmy, shimmy, shimmy all, ayy. We be lit and talking shit, that's how we parlay. Make that ass shake, this a party. I just wanna see you shimmy, shimmy all, ayy. Let me see that shimmy, shimmy. I call him Timmy, cause he be wishing on his booty, scoop me in a Bentley. Ain't got no time for baby mamas, all they do is envy. I make him trick, I got a bag, but he got plenty. Now let me see that shimmy, yeah, that's that cocoa pop. I make that ass shake, make them jaws drop. I got him throwing cash, diamonds make him cop. Ain't talking wheezy, but he lick it like a lollipop. Lick it like a lollipop, pull out your camera. I stay running up that money, I got stamina. Tell it, twerk it for me, titties Pamela. If you bust it open for me, might take you to Panama. Let me see that shimmy, shimmy, make that cocoa pop. Throw it in a circle for me, let me see it drop. Take it to the floor, I might get on top. Make that ass shimmy for me, show me what you got. Let me see it drop. Make that ass shimmy, make that ass shimmy for me. Make that ass shimmy, make that ass shimmy, see it. Make that ass shimmy, make that ass shimmy for me. Make that ass shimmy for me, show me what you got. Let me see that shimmy, shimmy, make that cocoa pop. Throw it in a circle for me, let me see it drop. Take it to the floor, I might get on top. Make that ass shimmy for me, show me what you got.
They saying that we the topic, that's gangster. We did this shit cause we had to, and I ain't stopping till my mother in that castle. I'm on this bag, I don't know why you mad, boo. Full speed on the gas, they smell a lot when I pass through. Time to run it up with the gang, nigga. No games, nigga, I'm still here with the same niggas. My whole team, we ain't playing with you. No games, nigga, I'm still here with the same niggas.
Remember I was broke, all that money I was missing it. It's level in its differences, fucking all of these mistresses. It's fish up in the sea, I guess my team gon' be the fishermen. The posture's so militant like Jordan when he dishing it, yeah. I cross them over cause they started doing mixy shit. To ease the pain, I flood the wrist, 340 out the government. Them apples on that sucker shit, big bird, I had to pluck it quick. My brothers who I'm fucking with for anyone, dumped 100 clip, yeah. No hesitation, to that back, yeah, we racing. Mama told me be patient, once you get it, they start hating. Start forming all these relations, reach their hands, I ain't shaking. Bad little bitch, yeah, she shaking. T.O.D. we really made it. Out the trench on some army shit. Trap on tilt, supply the strip. And you know we hiring. Put 10K inside the strip. Like this my shit, the Lions Den. You heard wrong, I'm not your friend. T.O.D. we did it again. Flood the protect and secure my skin. Gang.
We did this shit cause we had to, and I ain't stopping till my mother in that castle. I'm on this bag, I don't know why you mad, boo. Force me on the gas, they smell loud when I pass through. Time to run it up with the gang, nigga. No games, nigga, I'm still here with the same niggas. My whole team, we ain't playing with you. No games, nigga, I'm still here with the same niggas. I can't fuck with you if you out here moving funny style. Running wild, I'm shmoney dancing to that money now. Since a child, I just wanted to make my mother proud. Fell in love with this music, time for me to say my vows. Got a thou and I flipped it back into another thou. Put it all in this movement, grooving through the fucking town. With the gang, it ain't no thing to get 100 rounds. Youngest hungry to get this money and we on the prowl. Yeah, you niggas really not stopping shit. I got no time for the mentions or the gossip shit. They talk about us cause we always been the topic, bitch. Bitches blow my phone crazy, stupid, had to block the bitch. Yeah, I'm always here with the same niggas. Loopy T.O.D., yeah, they know the name, nigga. I'm just known for spitting this flame, nigga. No games, nigga, get introduced to this pain, nigga. We did this shit cause we had to, and I ain't stopping till my mother in that castle. I'm on this bag, I don't know why you mad, boo. Full speed on the gas, they smell loud when I pass through. Time to run it up with the gang, nigga. No games, nigga, I'm still here with the same niggas. Facts. My whole team, we ain't playing with you. No games, nigga, I'm still here with the same niggas.
I'm cool, calm, collective. This money on my checklist. When you broke out here, you start moving reckless. Niggas gotta respect it. Everything I did, I don't regret it. You only live once, don't forget it. I see myself like Rollo in a Rari, fuck a Tahoe. I'm trying to swerve the potholes. Big hefe like I'm Pablo. Odds up, but the top low. Got cheese like Nacho. Crack your shell, you a taco. I need my money pronto, or I'm OJ in a Bronco. Nigga bag talk, I ain't really with the convo. I'm getting older like where all the time go. December 8th, young nigga was letting off that rondo in these streets like I'm John Doe. And if it ain't about that money, nigga, dead your convo. I'm with the gang, nigga. Keep it 100, they do the same with you. And ever since I was born, I've been the same nigga. You play with me if you want, and I ain't playing with you.
We did this shit cause we had to, and I ain't stopping till my mother in that castle. I'm on this bag, I don't know why you mad, boo. Full speed on the gas, they smell loud when I pass through. Time to run it up with the gang, nigga. No games, nigga, I'm still here with the same niggas. My whole team, we ain't playing with you. No games, nigga, I'm still here with the same niggas. I just wanted more life, less drama and more commas. Make it close to the game and make sure that we all got us. We did this through the rain, ain't none of y'all gonna stop us. T.O.D., they know the name, and they saying that we the topic, that's gangster.
Some squares. You spreading rumors, but I don't really care. You keep on picking, I'ma beat your ass, I swear. Talking down on me, but I don't play fair. You bitches in my DMs, it's some squares. You spreading rumors, but I don't really care. You keep on picking, I'ma beat your ass, I swear. Talking down on me, but I don't play fair. You like paparazzi, wanna take a picture of me? Like the Hannibal, you wanna wear the skin off me? Cause I'm sexy and you wish you was fly like me. He got a big dick and I got ass on me. I heard he played you and he made you feel quite crazy. But I got his ring and you ain't got nothing on me. I don't know you, but you say that you know me. You're a lurker like my grandma, you so nosy. Say, little bitch, calm down. I'm like Mike Tyson in his prime first round. You think you slick? But you a clown. You got me laughing, you a joke in H-Town. You bitches in my DMs, it's some squares. You spreading rumors, but I don't really care. You keep on picking, I'ma beat your ass, I swear. Talking down on me, but I don't play fair. You bitches in my DMs, DMs, it's some square. You spreading rumors, but I don't really care. You keep on picking, I'ma beat your ass, I swear. Talking down on me, but I don't play fair. Silicone injections, that's that broke bitch shit. Get that fat transfer, that's that rich bitch shit. You ain't got no edges, I can buy you drops. Call a big booty Judy, cause I heard her shit work. I don't do no dirty shoes, I don't do no short nails. I just do the money walk, like a Mayweather's gal. I just bought me a rollie, but that shit did nothing for me, so I gave it away, cause that shit does not impress me. Little bitch, calm down. I'm like Mike Tyson in his prime first round. You think you slick, but you a clown. You got me laughing, you a joke in H-Town. You bitches in my DMs, it's some square. You spreading rumors, but I don't really care. You keep on picking, I'ma beat your ass, I swear. Talking down on me, but I don't play fair. You bitches in my DMs, it's some square. You spreading rumors, but I don't really care. You keep on picking, I'ma beat your ass, I swear. Talking down on me, but I don't play fair. Square up. I don't wanna wear no makeup, no wigs, no nothing. I got something to say. Square up.
Coast to coast.
Like I ain't never did that. Like I ain't the one that paved the path. Y'all niggas get been that. Like I ain't the one that got my name all etched in stone. I've been a king round here, y'all looking on my throne. They swear like I ain't home. And you can never fuck with me. I'm up on top, y'all stuck with me. I'm everything you love to be. Created a lane that y'all love to reach. Mad cause you ain't got a bus to keep. 10 times out of 10 I call because your bluff is weak. Don't tell me I ain't on.
God and me built this mess. I'm righteous brothers on the track, go be killed. Murder. Nearly lost my mind 1,000 times, but I stuck it. Didn't have $1 to my name, put a bucket. No love on these streets. None. Bullets come with beef, and we never ran from nothing. Had front row seats. We right there, point blank, ground zero. I move it, cause I love to play the field. I had dream of R&B business. Then I woke up homeless, dirty, hungry, and stinking. That's humble beginnings. I need ends for the ending. I used to be scared, now I'm too old to be carried. I used to have fear and never did like the sharing. I'm always prepared, been slinging shots since I'm 7. I do things that you never seen, and when the door closes, it look like a guillotine.
With the pride on the need to be boastful. Got a new stride and I seem to be global. Saying how to join is hot in the northeast. Happy in the bay, finesse that way in the A. Living my habit days, cool as a Vines homie. New Jersey music, Bon Jovi. Those who do work with me, those who have heard of me, know I keep moving real fast like emergency, urgency. Wearing my heart on my sleeve like it's high in fashion. And I am passion. Make them all see the light, giving food for thought so they know they eating right. Street kings to heaven when they sleep at night. Superman fly when I creep tonight. Cause love won't wait for me, loved ones pray for me. Jealous ones prayed on me, know that I'm glowing and flowing. They hate on me cause they ain't blowing. They show can't relate to me, bro, get away from me. Only need one mic, only need one clip, one strap, one click, plow. Now you're not Scarlet, New Brunswick. Pour it a little bit, hustle is sold to come from the cold. You better not open your little lip. Now the game's over, you little flip. And the way I spoke had my way with folks. The owner GM and the player coach. Their games played, they brought heat. Now they on that bull, Dwayne Wade. Rock the dynasty, Dame Jade. They just fade away, stage shade. They pray for my downfall, but they can't trade. Slave trade, salary cash, slave mentality. Raps whack, they ain't paid. Some of them subpar, now they all bust caps. I bust bars to bust back, got enough scars. Underground, muskrats, I run far. Buck wild, over envy, you fell from power. Dumb star, but the sun rises and sets. So at the end of the day, I'm as live as it gets. The hardest artist coming back in the venue. My heart of hearts will say I'm glad to offend you. Ain't art at heart, but you had to pretend to be part of art. You be the largest harvest for the starving artist when he passed me the menu.
Like I ain't never did that. Like I ain't the one that paved the path. Y'all
I'd rather die for what's right than live on my knees, and I ain't taking the mark of the beast. Woo, hey yo, it's spiritual warfare, and I ain't scared, cause I'm prepared to leave a sucker impaired. Yeah. Chief Birdsong and Thundermaker. Let's get it. Yo, I make mistakes and then I fix them. Approach with caution, I will fight off your issues. I may cause tears, but I don't provide tissue. If you come at self-liquid, then self will dismiss you. No bullets, blades, and vernacular missiles. Catch as I toss blows, did it shift your bone gristle? You must equate rock to challenge my stature. I'm really down for the cause and I don't click with actors. No perfection, but I'm chasing it. My past, I cherish my life, so I'm changing it. No more girl problems, I'm not in the proud. Focused on being in the family, man, now. Yeah, I'm about this paper in the brain between your tapers. Not interested in your envy, I'm the downfall of you haters. So fall back and get your soul crizzat. Lyrically, I'm a hurtin' for suckers that rock curtains. Fugazis. Yeah. I'd rather die for what's right than live on my knees, and I ain't taking the mark of the beast, sucker. Woo. Then live on my knees, and I ain't taking the mark of the beast, sucker. Woo.
I'm the queen, I'm the shooter, bitch, I'm mean. Voices in my head, Harley Quinn. Shoot me, I ain't dead, Harley Quinn. The baddest in the city, Harley Quinn. Take the whole trap, Harley Quinn. Wrench a nigga out, Harley Quinn. Bitch, I'm fucking Harley Quinn. Look, bitch, you can't touch me, you're not on my level. So your nigga drinks mouth feet, something clever. Diva D the baddest, bitch, you ain't heard. Back in high school, I was a jock, you was a nerd. Keep the lights low when I'm cruising ho. Every time they see me, they like, damn, here we go. Okay, my city young, bitch, I don't play. Told you I was getting money, stacking tall. Hey, I get the money and go. Probably so official, certified psycho. Yes, I'm the queen, all you hoes kiss my ring. Bustin' down walls, so beware of my team. Bitches be talking, but ain't with the shit. I pull the fuck up and empty the clip. For the whole pack, time to re-up, bitch. Long days in the trap, that worth it was a trip. Look, something like a movie, something to watch. Bitches be watching and them bitches trying. Bitches can't touch me cause bitches behind. All of my bitches, we ride and we fine. Trying to come for my brother, bitch, they gon' find. Your ass tied up, turned upside down. They gon' blame Illuminati cause bitch, they won't find evidence linking Diva deep to the crime. You can't touch me, I'm the queen, I'm the shooter, bitch, I'm mean. Voices in my head, Harley Quinn. Shoot me, I ain't dead, Harley Quinn. The baddest in the city, Harley Quinn. Take the whole trap, Harley Quinn. Wrench a nigga out, Harley Quinn. Bitch, I'm fucking Harley Quinn. Look, bats on the chase while we chasing this paper. They wasting my time, then they wasting my paper. They mugging the club, got no time for the haters. Keep my shades on, I'm with Joker, they haters. I fucking the city up with this greatness. Got the whole Gotham shaking with the 808 basin. In my suicide squad, got them shook, hell raising. Ain't no Justice League coming, niggas got your heart racing. Look, wouldn't get the money and go. Bitches tryna murk me, dead shot, head ho. El Diablo, flames burning, I'm the head honcho. Coming real soon, best believe you should know. If it's my team, we gon' fuck up your dream. Put a bag on your head so they can't hear you screaming. I can't help but laugh at the sound of your screams while I'm sipping espresso and robbing this train. You can't touch me, I'm the queen, I'm the shooter, bitch, I'm mean. Voices in my head, Harley Quinn. Shoot me, I ain't dead, Harley Quinn. The baddest in the city, Harley Quinn.
Yo, we going hard right now. This is underworld right now. Radio, you live, you got on the air. Hey, what's up, Ma? How you been?
You be looking ass nigga.
Crazy, man. You live.
Stop poking up. I get called all kind of shit with my goddamn ass. Bad boy style. I do. That's what
I know you do, you.
What do you do though besides the law?
I'm all poking hands. You know what I do. Stop playing with my tripping out every time, yeah.
I can motherfucking eat dick, yeah.
Much love to Pocahontas for chilling with us. Let's go.
They said $20 a dog, right? And then they got 3 of them dogs, man. We good. Tip. Hey, look, you wouldn't understand if your family came from another hood or a place of violence where they placed the silence on the tip of pistols, but the loud is good. Just to push the limits, take 1,000 pulls. Pray for peace around the howling ghouls that took the dip off that waterway and drowned instantly inside 1,000 pools. Lord, whistle with a lifeguard. We were kids, but we all in the deep end too. So much death in a small job. You can taste your soul, just inhale is cool. As the vein injected by the fluid and the leaves ignited, put a window in your brain cell or an open door left unsecured, or open sore from where your pain dwells. We can finally release it. In the high we shall increase it. This environment we unleash it. We can finally defeat it. See the zombie scenes completed, and the shirt was all we needed. A couple dips of this, the conniption hits as a hypnotist deceased him. 18 when he rolled up, Puerto Rican JCMD showed up. 25 years, he a little older. 25 broken chips on the shoulder. Said I was little bro, he was getting way fly than he used to. I mean fly than the usual. And he was getting way more high than he used to. I mean high than the usual. Damn.
Can you boost it? Do you think you sell it?
Show enough.
Can you take it to the corner so they can inhale it?
Show enough.
Right. Can you link a stamp? Please tell me that you mailed it.
Show enough.
Right. Do you think the double back and one to grab a second?
Show enough.
Let me get some party. That bullshit.
Let me get some
party. That bullshit.
Let me get some
party. That bullshit.
Let me get some
party. That party.
Let me get some. Hey, distractions here are extracting all of my fierce features. A third eye with a shut lid and a third arm for the back blader. 2 horns for the seed nose that you never see, but the sound reacher. Arm lane full of roots of evil. Armed heavy, army cerebral. I've avoided what they want me to stress. Poverty about the piss and the less. Black full of mutants, me Professor X and the culinary chemist with Iron Chef. I've been everywhere but paradise. I can tell them what the terror like. I can tell them they ain't been through hell and back, my nigga, your feathers bright. Test your drug, kids a multiple choice. Pass with flying colors, passing this joint. But pass a demon, why you passing your point? The comments hits or passing this present the point. Wouldn't understand if your family came from another hood, but they placed the bottom of the spoon on lighters and the dishes nasty, but the town is good. Right?
Can you boost it? Do you think you sell it?
Show enough.
Can you take it to the corner so they can inhale it?
Show enough.
Right. Can you link a stamp? Please tell me that you mailed it.
Show enough.
Right. Do you think the double back and one to grab a second?
Show enough.
Let me get some party. That bullshit.
Let me get some
party. That bullshit.
Let me get some
party. That bullshit.
Let me get some
party. That party.
Let me get some.
Haters wanna see me fail, bitches wanna see me lose. My ex nigga want me back, had to cut that nigga loose. I'm so focused now, homie, ain't no stopping me. Get 'em. I got 'em on some shook ones, Mark deep. Get 'em. I killed that quiet storm, yeah, silently. Get 'em. I'm not Nicki, I'm not Rim, I'm not Cardi B. I'm not Fox, I'm not Kim, just a new MC. So when y'all mention female rappers, that's including me. I'm like matter with a microscope, you can't see. But I will matter just like Adams, and I'm not Eve. I'm Albert Einstein with these prophecies. Martin Luther King having all these dreams. I foresee a lot, do y'all copy me? I'm foreseeing motherfuckers not stopping me. I break this shit down scientifically. And now I make statements, my lawyers speak. So fuck your evidence, I don't cop the pleas. And I don't need a hook, let me ride the beat. I'm walking with my heels on in confidence. You walking with your heels, so trying not to trip. This is for the have and the have-nots. And Jesus walked the water, could I tread on top? Tap, tap, could I tread on top? Tap, tap, could I tread on top? Tap, tap, could I tread on top?
And Jesus walked the water, could I tread on top?
They put the pressure on me and it made a diamond. I know my time is near, that's why I'm still grinding. We may be talking greatest, maybe talking greatest. I heard you had some words for me, let me demonstrate it. I'm really that real, I'm really from the Ville. I still love the smell of bullet shells, let me chill. See how Brooklyn made me, her life is crazy. I'm just trying to make my son $1 million, baby. You know I got that slick talk, that slick talk. I'm in the major leagues with the big dogs. Niggas can't fuck with me, not at all. I'm a pit on this beat with lock jugs. With lock jugs. With lock jugs. I'm a pit on this beat with lock jugs.
I still get the sauce, but no matter what the cost. Ride around that floss, leave your haters pissed off. I still get the moves. I still got the moves. Yeah, I still got the moves.
I still got the moves. Wait, I see you watching my moves. Niggas be hating, they want to see me lose. Spice on my sneeze, Louboutin be the shoes. She see the whip, so I know she gon' choose. Niggas be mad cause they know I'm a boss. Just bought a roller, you know I'm a floss. Shit costs a bag, I ain't care what it costs. Diamonds be dancing, I live in the loft. Wait, she fell in love with my moves. Wanna find out how I'm making the moves. She see the watch and the chain and she like it's insane, but I'm like you in love with the juice. Wait, you see my face on the tube. Hope you can do what you say you could do. Just bought a crib, couple acres or two. Brand new whip, don't play with the crew. Ride around town all day with the ooze. Fuck around, see my face on the news. Brand new trees lay right with the truths. Everything I got, I made on the move. Everything lit, no shade in the room. Gun so big, it's the size of a broom. Keep getting money, I'm trying to see an M. Don't play games, every day is a win. Tupac shit, cause I'm above on the rim. New snapback, got my name on the brim. 18 carats in the mouth for the grin. 19.5, what I pay for the bins. Did a couple years locked down in the pen. Nigga got big cause I stayed in the gym. Lil OJ, no ice in the gin. Keep making moves, don't play with my pen.
I still got the moves. 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 I pull up in the form. Make your lady wanna choose. Hey, I still got the moves. 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 I still got the sauce. But no matter what the cost. Ride around that floss. Leave your haters pissed off. Hey, I still got the moves. I still got the moves. Yeah, I still got the moves. I still got the moves.
Niggas make moves every day in the trap. Ride around town all day with the Mac. Try and make it out, get paid off the rap. Got a big ass gun, this a K with a strap. New Benz shit, no payment on that. Big ass check, got my name on the back. New wave shit, got it banging on the map. I'm G4 flight on the island with that. GQ shit, no style is a match. 14 bands what I had in the whack. Down AC, getting wild on the yak. Had a long ride home, got brain in the act. I don't know why no strings was attached. She gon' be mad when she see I'm on the map. In the Play Store, got my own little app. Take it to the streets, got the name on the hat. New coupe shit, no room in the back. Niggas stay wavy, I don't play with the rap. Gotta make moves, no time to relax. New white tee with the 9.5 max. In my lifetime, like Ho with the hat. Everything I lost, but I got right back. Now I'm on tour, getting paid for the act. Not BC, but I play with the Mac.
I still got the moves. 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 I pull up in the form. Make your lady wanna choose. Hey, I still got the moves. 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 I still get the sauce. But no matter what the cost. Ride around that floss. Leave your haters pissed off. I still got the moves.
I still got the moves.
Moves. Yeah, I still got the moves.
I still got the moves.
He just started testing, but we hauled them all. Now they praying for a blessing like an altar call. The way we stay investing, we done bought them all. Our section steady flexing, we be off the wall.
I'ma make the kitty pop and the titty flop. Me go silly with the rock with a steady bop. Eco-friendly with the guap, get the fetty up. I throw a party at my spot, I don't need a yacht. Bring it to a city cop with a semi-glock. I'ma take it to the top, moving up a notch. Wanna walk inside my sock, better tell you not. Because I guarantee we not the same sneaker box. He's a grown off aside, my copas collage. You telling me to reconcile with a thing we got. Keep my followers in line like it's Vietnam. Ain't no telling anytime, it can be the bomb. Open up and let me slide right into your mind. That's the governmental crime, I'ma leave it blind. Can't speak for all, saying we off the wall. I call the oop on y'all in due time.
Get excited to drop the flow when the beat drops. I go off. Get on the stage, I grab the mic and set the show off. Put your hands in the air, get prepared, I'm about to flame on them. Put up the gloves and ring the bell, I spray feel bang on them. Go ahead, clap for a queen, feeling kinda popular, living a dream. Pop in the game like a dress for the scene, cause I'm owning this name, homegrown in the jeans. Slow up the flow, pause, let me breathe, said the movement, ask my team. Gotta go hard, Wu-Tang cause the cream can't be compared. I'm a new type of breed, dope. Say my name 3 times, you should prepare for the smoke. I put the beat in a choke hold, I'm not letting go, cause I want it, pull up, turn up, ooh, what's good?
Women DMing and be on tilt. Do your body good, it be like milk. Grass up on the wall, it's beyond built. Keep it 100, we be like Will. Plaques up on the wall, it be on tilt. Stacks up on the wall, it be on stills. I dress it like yay, it's all killed. You get it like yay, cause y'all killed this Philly just
off the wall, 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 off the wall.
Haters try to test me, so I shot them all. Now they in the underworld like a Pokeball. Show no mercy, had them pussy cats against the wall. Crack backs like backpacks, I'm going off on y'all. Gone for a minute, now I'm back in this. JFK rap activist. Make sure you tag me if you're catching this. Gangsta shit, watch how I master this. Now you know who the master is. Leave both in your mattresses. Flexing with my team is hazardous. Why you suckers really wanna clash with us? Cause this headshot, like the slingshot. Shots the slingshot. Suckers backing down, but we not. Watch this fresh flow, spit out like Tide Pods in my mouth. JFK in Jersey in the house, and we wildin' out.
Ride around in my city, pockets like the guy Hickeys. Got a Glock tucked in my swishy. Tell a bitch drop and give me 50. And go wah, wah, they come and get me. Throw a shot back just like a frisbee. Rock a top hat like I'm Biggie. I advise you niggas don't diss me. And my side chick, she so frisky. Yeah, I know it's so risky. See notes around you so crispy. You come back around like 360. I'm short, black, and I'm chubby. And my hammer pants, you can't touch me. Got a bad hoe to handcuff me. Keep a knife like Crocodile Dundee.
I can buy my love or loyalty, my soul is overpriced. Life be like B, roll the dice when you're better than a shooter. We know he shots. Keep saying he blaming, but only me mugging and spamming your Grammy about that emoji life. But get him in person, I better reverse of that negative person's a poltergeist.
Body coated in a winter soldier with no coat when he been in the trench. Like a mama busted open for the coach and then her son is still sitting the bench. That's dry bones and the level that I'm on. You can't track with an iPhone, not a rock star. I'm a fly drone, a loud walk bar, leave your mind blown. Bouncing off the wall, the spot to be jumping no sky zone. This man boasts Thanos rapping, universe is snapping to the infinity time stone. Not to consume a doom and gloom. Your crew buffoons, your goony goons are loony tunes. Boom boom and spoon of fruity loons. Your fancy pinch, your mans be pansy bloom and June. So many bloody moves on Zoom, burn on a few, jumping into the booze. Other dudes with another excuse, hitting people up with the news. Got a couple of views, bumping the bruise. I refuse, I got something to prove. I'm gonna use and abuse, and the drama ensues. Lots of the odds and the ooze, shoes that I'm not gonna lose. Rockin', I gotta pop it and hop in and flag in the pew, dropping the clues, bombs. I promise we want it with you.
He just started testing, but we hauled them all. Now they praying for a blessing like an altar call. The way we stay investing, we done bought them all. Our section steady flexing, we be off the wall.
Women DMing and be on tilt. Do your body good, it be like milk. Grass up on the wall, it's beyond built. Keep it 100, we be like Will. Plaques up on the wall, it be on tilt. Stacks up on the wall, it be on stills. I dress it like yay, it's all killed. You get it like yay, cause y'all killed this Philly just
off the wall, 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 off the wall.
I
ain't for the low, but it's all on. Now a little bitch, give me hold on. Hold on, hold on. Now a little bitch, give me hold on. I ain't for the low, but it's all on. Now a little bitch, give me hold on. Hold on, hold on. Now a little bitch wanna come on. I ain't for the low, but it's all on. Now a little bitch wanna hold on. Hold on, hold on. Now a little bitch, give me hold on. I ain't for that little, but it's all on. Now a little bitch, give me hold on. Hold on, hold on. Now a little bitch wanna come on. She listens to living my life. She wanna come fuck me tonight. She wanna come touch me tonight. Her pussy is wet and it's tight. She sound be swimming all night. Her sound be swimming all night. Her booty jiggling when she walk. You see the dimples when she talk. Shorty call me from the West End. She said she flexing with her best friend. I'm in the trap, a little J. I'm in the trap, a little baby. Smoking dope in Lower Cali. I flew my bitch in front of the valley. All of my niggas, they stally. See how he talking their blicky. And he gon' shoot till it's empty. If you not gang, you can't hang. Hold on. If you not gang, you can't hang. Hold on. Goody, he told that F in there. And he gon' shoot till there's nothing in it. Cody and Snoop bring the straps out. I for that bitch through her back guy. I ain't for the low, but it's all on. Now a little bitch, give me hold on. Hold on, hold on. Now a little bitch, give me hold on. I ain't for that low, but it's all on. Now a little bitch, give me hold on. Hold on, hold on. Now a little bitch wanna come on. I ain't for that low, but it's all on. Now a little bitch wanna hold on. Hold on, hold on. Now a little bitch, give me hold on. I ain't for that low, but it's all on. Now a little bitch, give me hold on. Hold on, hold on. Now a little bitch wanna come on.
I'm tryna tell her to come on. Lately I've been gone. I've been moving fast, you gon' have to hold on. A Mary James, red bottom, Givenchy for a living. Ain't been in town in so long, but when I get back, I'ma kill it. I put 100 on the freeway. Just call me when they touch down in BK. I got youngins with that gunplay in broad day. It ain't safe where I come from, but you gon' have to hold on. Did it on my own, ain't have no help, I think myself. $1,000 bills, European when I still had to boss up on them niggas. Ain't have no other choice, everything I said I meant it. You can hear it in my voice.
I ain't for the low, but it's all on. Now a little bitch, give me hold on. Hold on, hold on. Now a little bitch, give me hold on. I ain't for the low, but it's all on. Now a little bitch, give me hold on. Hold on, hold on. Now a little bitch wanna come on. I ain't for the low, but it's all on. Now a little bitch wanna hold on. Hold on, hold on. Now a little bitch, give me hold on. I ain't for that low, but it's all on. Now a little bitch, give me hold on. Hold on, hold on. Now a little bitch wanna come on.
Many years ago, showing love to Trayvon Martin, who was definitely done an injustice in this. And we started out with the hoodies, pulls and hoodies, and I brought out the Get Money Gangsta CDs, you know, in tribute to him. And we had volume 8. I'm gonna take it up to volume 10, maybe even further, I don't know. But this is definitely a dedication to not only Trayvon Martin, but to all of the people slain by, you know, police brutality and the injustice in the system we got. So much love to everybody that's supporting. Much love that understands, to the people that understands, you know, what we're trying to do in this underworld movement. It's definitely a movement. Y'all need to join this movement. Go to undergroundentertainment.bandcamp.com. Download the mix CDs and DVDs. Check out the show on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, whatever it may be. UTV Raps hosted by me, o.stylez, DJ JFK. You already know. If you try to get on here, that's www.
Shorty wanna ride my way. I'm lit. Shorty wanna ride my way. Oh shit. Shorty wanna ride my way. My way. Shorty wanna ride my way. My way. Shorty wanna ride my way. My way. Shorty wanna ride my way. Shorty wanna ride my way. I'm lit. Shorty wanna ride my way. Oh shit. Shorty wanna ride my way. Shorty wanna ride my way. My way. Shorty wanna ride my way. My way. Shorty wanna ride my way. Shorty Shorty wanna ride my wave. No, shorty gonna ride that dick. Yeah, I was just stunting on the gram. Yeah, let me Snapchat that shit. Whoa, niggas be hating a lot. Ounce of codeine and I stay on the block. Bag me a bitch and I stay in the cut. I pull up with that thing, see me whipping the drop. 357, replay with that Glock. Calling this jacket, she fucking or not. Notice the wave and she all on my dick, but you gotta be bad, we don't fuck with no thoughts. Riding my wave, I'm just trying to get paid. All in the club and I'm on that Douce. Got that shit lit, start hitting my wave. Got that shit lit, start hitting my wave. Whoa, shorty wanna ride my wave. I'm lit. Shorty wanna ride my wave. Oh shit. Shorty wanna ride, wanna ride, wanna ride, wanna ride, wanna ride my wave. My wave. Shorty wanna ride my wave. My wave. Shorty wanna ride my wave. My wave. Shorty wanna ride, wanna ride, wanna ride, wanna ride, wanna ride my wave. Up in the club, we about to get lit. Bottles on deck and we blowing that piff. Hundreds some models, see one I'ma get. I got the drip out the walk in this bitch. Whoa, I just pulled up in the Jag. Straight off the line, had to go on my bag. Chasing these checks and I'm ducking these bitches. I'm all on the jet and I'm getting that lag. Whoa, is it the flick of the wrist? No, look at this shit on my wrist. Oh, all of these diamonds, they shining, can't even see what is the time on this bitch. Whoa, I'm in the club with the strap. Looking for me, but you know where I'm at. Niggas on lean, I ain't fucking with that. I got the juice, I ain't giving it.
Look, Lord bless me, shit, I think I need some holy water. Niggas ain't hit me in a while. Damn, he going harder. I dipped you in my world now. Show me consideration. She takes me to my phone like, boy, your dick amazing. Fuck these niggas, let them die. That's what you get for hating. Shoebox full of money, boy, I get the cake. My bitch ass big from the back, she look Jamaican. Smoking, get stoned, boy, I'm something like a Mason. I hear you talking, but can't see you, nigga. Stevie Wonder, bring the thunder. Your bitch call my phone, bring a number. Hold of a lion, I ain't lying, I'm just stating facts. I'm from a city where there's snakes and some niggas rats. Got it out the mud, I ain't had pot to piss it. Me, myself, and I, we don't want your proposition. Went to jail, 30 minutes, my bitch bound me out. Ford Nick with the cannon, I'm wildin' out. Young niggas, you are not alone, I feel your pain. I remember I was broke, jacking everything. I'm from a block where it was hot, it don't never rain. Now these niggas turn pussy, man, ain't that a shame? Feel my pain, but you can't, cause we are not the same. Use a bitch, you're drunk driving, stay up in your lane. I'm the shit, I'm done rhyming, I'm just giving game. Move my family on the island, I'm on some different things. 40 with the dick, call that bitch transgender. Next tattoo on my back gon' say cash getter. You trash nigga, left you in the past nigga. I'ma help your pussy ass and wrap you in this bag nigga. Shit is easy, heard the tough talk, wait where you at. I'm about to go, T-Tucker boy, get the gas. Matter of fact, Christmas presents, hey this shit's a rap. Small gun, big clip, mixing me.
It's all full of. We don't listen to the. They all full of. We don't listen to the. They all full of. But we don't listen to the. Yeah, hey yo, 99% of these rappers be telling fizz, trying to find crap that they packing to sell to kids. They never tell them to be head of a chapter, they tell them to be a rapper, like they all live happily ever after. Although it's nice how some of us getting iced out, kind of a slave riding a wave getting wiped out. The love of the money's the root of all evil, polluting their people so addictive and using is legal. They say they do it real big, unbelievable. You say you do it real big, we don't believable. INDEPENDENT, and they don't know what that means. That's why when these weak G's pretending we envy, but see I'm over that scheme. A real MC, it's like a punch your face trying to sound all deep. Oh, sunken place, and you're full of. It's all full of. We don't listen to the. They all full of. We don't listen to the. They all full of. But we don't listen to the.
Talking all that tough shit. Come and get me, pal. But y'all got no nerve like a root canal. I'm loyal to a fault line. So when I shake these, to the bones, best believe it's assault time. They talking about me, they clocking the watch. The kicks cost 3, I drop 2 on the socks. I watch your iPhones get hot in our zones. I don't go live, I turn up in time zones. Either she love me or she love me not. I've been known to smoke it out like a hookah shot. They say the finer things in life often come with higher price. Well, the way they treat a bro, might as well have gave me life. And the way I run the track, might as well have gave me nights. And my shit's so fly, you might as well give me likes. Knock off the bull. You know I go hard. I go on the beats, couldn't fit in my draw.
It's all full of. We don't listen to the. They all full of. We don't listen to the. They all full of. They all full of.
Yeah. First it wasn't. Then you call me a colored man. Then it was Negro, now it's Afro-American. I don't need your names, cause I got my own. I'm the original man who's been lost from home. Now for untold years, no one showed they cared. That all my black people had to live in fear. But now stop, because your tricks don't appear to me. I'm a wiser man now, because I studied my history. Born on the top, I'm still living on a hump. Don't consume white sugar, but you can get these lumps. The lame BS James, fake card playing trumps. I got a poker for a joker if you wanna play Trump. Damn, Cali devils calling me a racist zealous, cause I'm conscious of the truth without fear. And I'm telling, at least ain't dirty priests running around or killing. Got the when I see it, even without smelling it.
It's all full of. We don't listen to the. They all full of. We don't listen to the. They all full of. They all full of.
We got smoke to give and we give it for free. Bags in and they in for the cheap. I ain't finna lay out with no freak. I'm hitting that hoe and I leave. Street nigga, I'm pulling out weeds. Fuck at the gang, they was sleeping on me. Glock 19, I keep it on me. Reach at me wrong and we put him to sleep. Get him out of here. We ride wise in the Jeep. Rod, me, Glock, Ron, and Reek. I'm fucking up back ends at the mall. I'm spending racks on sneaks. Knock him off the map, delete. They have a feast, I tell them to eat. I'm on my way and I ain't reached the peak. That little nigga hot like Texas Pete. Yeah. Hot. I make your salary every week. I'm in the hills, Beverly. She wanna fuck, let's schedule it. I have a hoe on the mirror. He say he won't smoke, we bury him. Gang on my back, let him. Yeah, these niggas cat like fairy tale. Bitch, I'm good everywhere.
Fuck what you thought, we got big guns. Ride with that Glock, no cap gun. Put that to your head if you owe some. Then pull up on Stunner and smoke one. I got a plug if you need one, cause my niggas moving the whole boat. I got a bitch in a Nissan, I'm finna fuck up that whole throat. Niggas won't smoke, then I'm bringing the chimney. Don't know gymnastics, but might used to send me. This clip extended with alternate endings. Run up a check, I don't never get winded. Niggas can't see me, the windows is tinted. Scoop up your bitch in the motherfucking business. You out of line and I'll put you back in it. I bought a strap just to match with the Fendi.
We got smoke to give and we give it for free. Bags in and they in for the cheap. I ain't finna lay out with no freak. I'm hitting that hoe and I leave. Street nigga, I'm pulling out weeds. Fuck at the gang, they was sleeping on me. Glock 19, I keep it on me. Reach at me wrong and we put him to sleep. Get him out of here. We got smoke to give and we give it for free. Bags in and they in for the cheap. I ain't finna lay out with no freak. I'm hitting that hoe and I leave. Street nigga, I'm pulling out weeds. Fuck at the gang, they was sleeping on me. Glock 19, I keep it on me. Reach at me wrong and we put him to sleep. Get him out of here.
Packs coming in from the west side while I'm beating your bitch from the backside. I tell her open the mouth wide, she take a hit like the front line. Put him to sleep, it's bedtime. That chopper sing nothing but lullabies. Real nigga, I'm not the mother guys. I fuck a bitch out of panty line. Right out of I want that head, cat scan. She let me fuck, no lap dance. That pussy tight like a wristband. Pass that to my nigga like Steve Nash. I'm fucking bitches in Calabasas. Mail back to work, can't forget your package. Got it for 12, sell it for 21. Ooh, y'all niggas savage.
We got smoke to give and we give it for free. Bags in and they in for the cheap. I ain't finna lay out with no freak. I'm hitting that hoe and I leave. Street nigga, I'm pulling out weeds. Fuck at the gang, they was sleeping on me. Block 19, I keep it on me. Reach at me wrong and we put them to sleep. Get them out of here. We got smoke to give and we give it for free. Bags in and they in for the cheap. I ain't finna lay out with no freak. I'm hitting that hoe and I leave. Street nigga, I'm pulling out weeds. Fuck at the gang, they was sleeping on me. Block 19, I keep it on me. Reach at me wrong and we put them to sleep. Get them out of here.
Yeah. Q. Rush to the flow, yeah. Word to God, keep blessing this. Black don't crack, Humo rock the edifice. Fetishes, whipping music for the mills, making money like a mother effer. Complex Oedipus, cut the heads off of snakes, stay venomous. Represent the real, make face, pay penances. 16 bars of death, make up sentences. MCs welcome rappers, vacate the premises. Make your proof of what God's got for me. Something came from nothing, then God got glory. All my life lessons, not much of top stories. No matter where I go, so clutch, vibe, Ori. You froze up, you a poser, you a mannequin. No heart, not a man of steel, you a man of tin. Set up for the chip, open for the wind, swish. Wrestle with my devils, then I'm going for the pin, bitch. Hashtag follow, hashtag bless. Pose with the milk, hashtag fresh, y'all. Grew healthy like hashtag yes, y'all. Group selfie like hashtag yes. Hashtag follow, hashtag bless. Pose with the milk, hashtag fresh, y'all. Grew healthy like hashtag yes, y'all. Group selfie like hashtag yes. All day sucker, that's the song and the key of life. All the time, that's the point I'm on. RIP the fight, losing out on all the love and law just for seeing lights. Working on the gram, but that Joan wanna be a wife. I ain't judging you for trying to make a flip. Think you trying to make a pick, trying to make a flip. Wall in on the set, baby, make a dip. In the click, just mommy's on that, baby, make it tip. Take a front seat, girl, things falls apart. Boat up in the tanks, better know the sharks. If it's Game of Thrones, then we rolling with the stars. Never safe, floating on the banks, know it's art. Attention is the drug for the hype. You're in, ass out, none of your followers knowing you. You do it for the love of the likes, and your friends max out, but ain't around when you going through. It goes down in the DM. Queen of the curve, mixed message not sending. They get down for the freaking. It is what it is till it is top trending. Hashtag follow, hashtag bless. Pose with the milk, hashtag fresh, y'all. Grew healthy like hashtag yes, y'all. Group selfie like hashtag yes. You can't lose me on a fast track. Used to doing fast rap ahead of time. What you call the future is the flashback. Find me where the cash at. Not a banker, I'm a thinker. Wanna breaking cash apps till the crash apps. Hazmat, this is highly sensitive material. Everybody salty, hypertension in your stereo. Great if it's relatable, hate if it's debatable. Scrapping over trap on autocrats biodegradable. They ain't even paid for. Live free, die harder than Bruce Willis. Still his jersey balls unbreakable. Make the ball glam squad, pretty much hand job. Expose you and cross your way left. Sham guy, crying Tyrese mean. Struggles that we have to tackle. Others wanna laugh and cackle. Crack him in his Adam's apples. Brother crack the shackles from the people being cursed. Words of the tabernacle, live is evil in reverse. Hashtag follow, hashtag bless. Pose with the milk, hashtag fresh, y'all. Grew healthy like hashtag yes, y'all. Group selfie like hashtag yes. Hashtag follow, hashtag bless. Pose with the milk, hashtag fresh, y'all. Grew healthy like hashtag. The new age of hip hop, What is this? What is this? This is a Northeast production.
coast to coast.
Sometimes you just gotta sit back, watch and listen, get a full understanding of things, you know? You didn't want me seeing brighter days, and only wanted me to lose my way. And all them jealous thoughts that you displayed, listen, I seen it coming from a mile away. Plotted on me, trapped me in your maze, but it was nothing for me to find my way. I was prepared for this since 20 days, nigga. I seen it coming from a mile away. Brightest day, I done read your mind, your thoughts. I saw the signs, describe me, motherfucker. Could've waited to catch a nigga blind. All of your intentions was to knock my hustle. Pull a pistol on me, leave the scene with all my bundles. I seen it coming so vivid.
I seen it coming from a mile away. I seen it coming from a mile away.
I seen it coming from a mile away. I
seen it coming from a mile away. Oh, I seen it coming from a mile away.
I seen it coming from a mile away.
I seen it coming from a mile away. Coming from a mile away.
Felt in my soul, in my guts. Folk end in your life, they don't care how they hurt you. Say you a dream, get it going to murk you. Doggy dog world, guessing they personal. Shit goes so left, ain't it reversible. Hold up, motherfuckers never wanted me to blow up. Saw coming, they was prepping me for bad news. I was ready, prepared, and played it so smooth. You had no clue, holla back cool, then I'm back cool. Looking brand new, fresh on them. Somebody heard, somebody mad, huh? Thought I didn't know I was close to a downfall. Thought I wasn't taking it home with a grandpa. How long will this go on? Faking, prolong, acting like you got love for me, acting trying to get close to me, acting like you don't know.
I seen it coming from a mile away. I seen it coming from a mile away. I seen it coming from a mile away. Oh, I seen it coming from a mile away. I seen it coming from a mile away. I seen it coming from a mile away. Are you ready? Are you ready? Baby, are you ready? We should be ready for anything. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you? Are you ready? Are you ready? Baby, are you ready? We should be ready for anything. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you
acting like you got love for me, acting trying to get close to me, acting like you don't notice me. Signs add up for my eyes. I know your type from a mile away. Can't want no for me not today.
And you don't stop, and you don't quit, yeah. And you don't stop, and you don't stop, and you don't quit, and you don't stop. To my Father up in heaven, to soldiers on the earth, to fallen ones laying 6 feet under that dirt, to the church and the people with their hands to the Lord, the melody ahead to the keys to the chord. I explore down the path where I paint the things I see, a light from above, the reflection it is me, the sea and the waves and the water is my flow, vital to the streets when I speak things will grow. Let them know that the word off the book turn to flesh. We need them in this ghetto habitation where I rest. God bless all my family, Manhattan to the aid. The victory is given when you see another day. Let us pray for the young boy shot in Chirac. Policy plain and we are caught up in the trap. Bring it back to the truth when I'm preaching in the booth. The project apostle, the leader of the troops. Got aim and I shoot. And you don't stop, and you don't quit, yeah. And you don't stop, and you
don't stop, and you don't quit, and you don't stop. Faith is the key to get where you need to be. Living in the ghetto, blinded by the things we see. Let it be, cause I trust that he got me this fall. When shots popped off to the crash in the car, leaves low when the wind trees move in the breeze. A wave that'll flow over all 7 seas. Seeing me is a king that was given all things. A wealth much deeper than a 4-carat ring. So I bring a new thought from the city where I live. Murders every day, closing schools on the kids. Praying for a change, so I work and do the same. We all love the sun, baby, can you stand the rain? Through the storms and the pain, I can never be the same. A product of environment, so who am I to blame? Bring it back to the truth when I'm preaching in the booth. The cornerstone evangelist, the speaker of the troops. God aim and I shoot. And you don't stop,
What's up, Queen B? How you been? Much love.
o.stylez, yeah, special up to you too. Queen Bean, and I mean that. Call you a king bean for whatever struggle you have been through. You a king for that. You made it. You made it to tell your story, to pass that message, and I'm proud of you.
Thank you. That was real.
It's true. Okay, believe that. It's true. It's not a game. It's not a game. When you do all your bullshit, keep your ass at home like me. So when you get fucked up, you fall asleep in your bed and wake up like a nigga.
You be tripping.
Your ass better be home too. You heard what I said. You heard what I said. Everybody pray. You better be at home. So peace out.
Shouts to my girl Queen B for tuning into the show. Much love to you, Underworld Radio, with your girl Sticky o.stylez. Beats by my homie Meta. Request lines is definitely open, y'all. Let's go.
Top guns, Robin, back with another hit. Bitch, I don't need you. Bitch, I don't need you.
This boy got a hit.
Bitch telling me to eat her. Bitch, you crazy and stupid or something. Hit it once, I'ma leave her. Spin a band on my sneaker. Spin a band on my sneakers. Spend 12 on the marriage. Tell a bitch come from me. Tell a bitch I don't need her. Bitch telling me to eat her. Bitch, you crazy and stupid or something. Hit it once, I'ma leave her. Spin a band on my sneaker. Spin a band on my sneakers. Spend 12 on the marriage. Tell a bitch come from me. Tell a bitch I don't need her. Tell the bitch I don't need her now. Spending her check on my sneakers. So it was nice to meet ya. Charging 2 bands for a feature. And now the price going up. Whole style level up. Niggas ain't fuck with us. When the D rolling up. Now this is the double. And the beat bumping some gun up. Rocking out heavy metal. While I'm just loading the gun up. Niggas wish that they was us. AMG super speed. Yeah, different from the D's. Niggas can't fuck with me. Bitch telling me to eat her. Bitch, you crazy and stupid or something. Hit it once, I'ma leave her. Spin a band on my sneaker. Spin a band on my sneakers. Spend 12 on the marriage. Tell a bitch come from me. Tell a bitch I don't need her. Bitch telling me to eat her. Bitch, you crazy and stupid or something. Hit it once, I'ma leave her. Spin a band on my sneaker. Spin a band on my sneakers. Spend 12 on the marriage. Tell a bitch come from me. Tell a bitch I don't need her. Always been different designer. Back in the day with the Prada. Now I'm just rocking Da Vinci. The off-white drippy is in me. Now I'm just rocking the fly shit. The easy found is so sloppy. You know that if I come out, I got it. You know if I come out, I got it. 10K in my pocket. If I like it, I cop it. Super speed in the car. AMG full of bras. I don't need none of y'all. clip you off, drop you off. Bitch telling me to lead her. Stupid bitch, I don't need ya. Bitch telling me to eat her. Bitch, you crazy and stupid as son. Hit it once, I'ma leave her. Spin a band on my sneaker. Spin a band on my sneakers. Spend 12 on the marriage. Tell a bitch, get from me. Tell a bitch, I don't need her. Bitch telling me to eat her. Bitch, you crazy and stupid as son. Hit it once, I'ma leave her. Spin a band on my sneaker. Spin a band on my sneakers. Spend 12 on the marriage. Tell a bitch, get from me. Tell a bitch, I don't need her.
But all of my woes, tryna run through a check with all of my woes. I swear my schedule is too full. Only got one dick, but all of these hoes. I like my drinks biracial. I mix that dog shit with that light dog, and my girl biracial. Her mama black, but she look white dog. I don't wanna ball no more. I don't wanna flex no more. I don't wanna be this fly, but I can't help myself. Nigga ask Jesus why they call me superb. I ain't got a blemish. Lying to these women like a crooked politician. I just keep it real. Only talk it if I live it. You ain't seen a nigga this early in a minute. Baby, I'm flying in the 747. Doing 120 in the 745. 32 shots loaded in this Mac 11. Drinking since 9, so we to remind you, I've been fresh since 9-2, putting in work for so long, about to blow up like a suicide bomb do. Got a fist full of magic beans, chasing with this Michael Jordan punch. Love my project chick, yeah she reckless, but she gorgeous though. I don't wanna stunt no more, I don't give a fuck no more. I don't wanna be this fly, but I can't help myself. Nigga ask Jesus why. I know you tight, you pussy and you timid. Phony ass nigga with a fabricated image. You can't keep it real. We see straight through your gimmicks. You ain't seen a nigga this early in a minute. Baby, I'm flying in the 747. Doing 120 in the 745. 32 shots loaded in this Mac 11. Drinking since 9, so we
like they never seen the car before. Went hard for her, stayed in the truck for her. Catch a body for her, ain't nobody jacking us. Snatched her from the dealership, I fell in love with her. I love her look when I pull up to the club with her. To the hood with her, out the garage with her. I got them looking like they never seen the car before. Went hard for her, her, stayed in the trap for her. Catch a body for her, ain't nobody jacking us. 80 racks for her, paid straight cash for her. Another 20 on the details, you add it up. She high maintenance, so I pamper her. Every few months, 1,000 just to tune her up. Heart junior way, I maneuver her. Baby girl, automatic, but she so clutch. Millionaire touch, I wash her up twice a day. Every time I show my face, she be in the way. Out making moves, posting through the avenues. Might grab me some blunts when I get a food. At the hat, dress fly like my Sunday dress. We campaigning, Lord my running mates. Since they busted gates, I've been busting plays. We stay running in and out of NJ. Garden Station hit the parkway on a date. I keep her on the move, she act up, I pump her brakes. Snatched her from the dealership, I fell in love with her. I let her look when I pull up to the club with her. To the hood with her, out the garage with her. I got them looking like they never seen the car before. Went hard for her, stayed in the trap for her. Catch a body for her, ain't nobody jacking us. Snatched her from the dealership, I fell in love with her. I let her look when I pull up to the club with her. To the hood with her, out the garage with her. I got them looking like they never seen the car before. Went hard for her, stayed in the trap for her. Catch a body for her, ain't nobody jacking us. 20-inch screen, when I'm in reverse. Interior so sick, Lord need a nurse. Leather on the seat, leather on the floor. Wood grain of job, leather all across the board. Remote control make it hard to feel like I'm driving. Push 200, feel like I'm flying. Skin is built in, so they undetected. I tap the steering wheel and send my cop friend a message. Life is beautiful, damn right, so is she. She got me in my feelings, thinking we was meant to be. Popped the cherry when I peeled the plastic from inside her. First time I laid my eyes on her, had to buy her. No negotiations, plus I left a tip. Had to show the dealer who we doing business with. Now it's back massages every time we in park. And wipe the hater guts because she stole my heart. I snatched her from the dealership, I fell in love with her. I let her look when I pull up to the club with her. To the hood with her, out the garage with her. I got them looking like they never seen the car before. Went hard for her, stayed in the trap for her. Catch a body for her, ain't nobody jacking us. Snatched her from the dealership, I fell in love with her. I let her look when I pull up to the club with her. To the hood with her, out the garage with her. I got them looking like they never.
Yeah, no doubt. Power now, the power now. The power now, the power now. Can't trust a soul when you out there on the road. The season changed, but the world remains cold. Shot to the head, the Mom Dukes is a body blow. The facts of life like Nell Carter is scatto. Jewels never sold on the antique road show. Keep it in the family for years to come in, the value grow. Minus wealth up the ante, put it on extra glow. Not gonna turn it down, small fry, hell no. Respect the game is how you get it back for show. I'm a lyric icon, you be the average Joe. Trapped on the corner getting pennies and silvers for dough. Really in investments, big trips and bungalows. It's all part of the planet, drops like dominoes. Niggas that be moving on other shit, let them go. Graduated twice from the bullshit, professional. Graduated twice from the bullshit, professional. Put 10 on it, nigga, this is flaming hot. Put 10 on it, nigga, you bout to lose your spot. Put 10 on it, nigga, this is flaming hot. Put 10 on it, nigga, you bout to lose your spot. Put 10 on it, nigga, this is flaming hot. Put 10 on it, nigga, you bout to lose your spot. Put 10 on it, put 10 on it, put 10 on it. Hey yo, you either getting chicken or you broke, that's what it is. This shit been going on since niggas was little kids. So get your mind right at a young age. To own your biz, get on and lie about some shit you never did. Never had a pot to piss in, still that's how you live. Knock off chains and you the top nigga. Me, I I'm in the soup kitchen cooking, trying to earn a gig. Work for mine from off the corner so you can keep the gigs. Niggas wanted me for dead, had to stay positive. Talk about no success shit, that's sugarish. Prissy poop, makeup bag dudes, you extra tricks. Me, I'm from the cloth at the round table, you make no sense. Won't get stuck fucking with her, that's some other shit. Get it on with the vocab, now watch me ice the wrist. But we can get into, watch me stack them grits. But we can get into, watch me stack them grits. Put 10 on it, nigga, this is flaming hot. Put 10 on it, nigga, you bout to lose your spot. Put 10 on it, nigga, this is flaming hot. Put 10 on it, nigga, you bout to lose your spot. Put 10 on it, nigga, this is flaming hot. Put 10 on it, nigga, you bout to lose your spot. Put 10 on it, put 10 on it, put 10 on it. Hey yo.
Brainwash, have to get my brainwash. I was brainwash, have to take my brainwash. Brainwash, have to take my brainwash. I was brainwash, have to get my brain back. Brain demon, had a nigga sleeping deep sleep like a creep on the creep again. Wolves to the sheep again. I'm just trying to eat again. BBD trying to make these fools the men in these streets again. Well, my people looking weak again. Them people thinking that it's weed again. About the copper time flow is weed again. Letting off 100 shots from the heat again. Flood the news station with the grief again. Since I awoke, I can see the punchlines of the joke. The population of a nation and the quote. You can create change without hope. Brainwash, no soap, unorthodox, no. I spit like a dope. Brainwash, 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 brainwash. I was so washed up, didn't wanna get up, just turn up, smoking loud, fill my urn up, got so hot, a nigga about to burn up, woke up, now a nigga trying to learn something, yo, I learned a few new lessons, not from my oppressors, make my people look small like a lesson, trying to keep us under pressure, so we take these drastic measures, now we tip the scale, no we tilt the scale, fuck that, we done flip the scale of suicides, homicides, death in jail cells, trying to take us out to hell, is there heaven to hell, couldn't watch us on with TV, so they put the TV in the cell, just like they put the TV in the cells, I was brainwashed, I couldn't see myself, almost 2 decades, no shade, I created underworld TVD by myself, did it for the love, not the wealth, tied it with the belt, nah, brainwash, had to get my brainwash, brainwash, had to take my brainwash, brainwash, had to get my brainwash, brainwash, had to get my brainwash, brainwash, had to get my brainwash, brainwash, had to take my brainwash, brainwash, had to get my brainwash, you got a choice, brainwash, had to get my brainwash, brainwash, you got a chance, and I'm brainwash, what your mama didn't give you and the white man won't give you, brainwash, you got a chance, brainwash,
If you feel bad, yeah. Oh Lord, I bet you have.
Yeah. You know, everybody chooses different paths. But sometimes in life we know it ain't the path we really want to take. Many things have impacts on our choices and what we call important. Outside influence, what's cool and what's not. Upbringing, the list goes on.
Save me from the start. Save me from the start so I can be free.
Free, you know.
Save me from the start.
Okay.
Save me from the start. Like a roaring thunder. Like a roaring thunder. So I can be free.
Homie, he was gifted but was with the shit. Easily persuaded, first to ride, living to die. Kinda hopeless, sold to the smokers, perk for the poppers. Never was sober. Christmas approaching, holiday season. Pockets is empty, Timberlands leaning. Kinda depressing. He feeling desperate. Felt he had to get his daughter a present. Someone to bike, mommy one nights. His name was Mike. This was his life, always felt the pressure by the ones that was close. Suffering from the oddity of keeping up with the Jones. Oh boy, he looking for a jokes cause his girl wants toys. Mike's mother idolized materials, so we grew up placing worldly items on a pedestal. And now we down to send you to heaven too. For it, he'll commit to that, probably get you hit for that. Pull up with the mat to see your back, and this is a fact. Plotted on the jewelry store hit. Figured if he run up in there with a fully loaded clip, a black bag that fill up to the tip, ski mask with the hoodie low. He can do it quickly, make it come up and be good to go. Desperation, it can lead you to your deathbed. Niggas down to risk it all and sleep in jail beds. Mike was thinking foolishly, ran up in it stupidly. He can give a fuck about togetherness and unity.
Save me from the stars, save me from the stars, so I can be free, free. Save me from the stars, save me from the stars, like a roaring thunder, like a roaring thunder.
On the pop right out the back room, shotty on him. Aimed at Michael, told him drop it, this your final warning. This was something Michael didn't expect. When you young and full of greed, you'll do the most for a check. The store clerk told the owner, don't shoot though. Looked at Michael's eyes, saw the pain, said I used to be you, bro. We can call the cops, have you charged with armed robbery. But I don't think a prison is the place you ought to be. You ought to be free, you don't really wanna do this, man. You got your finger on the trigger, you don't wanna pull it. Nigga, you lost in the sauce for real. You letting others' expectations make you rob and steal. Living a life with your mind in the shackles. Just another victim to a system that they lie about religion, creating holidays and advertising. Got you spending money that you never had, buying things that's only a fad. And you surrounded by ignorance. The ones around you skipping bills to cop the iPhone. They got their babies in designer, but what's funny, they still living in their mom's home. Anything to get a couple comments and likes. Glorifying bullshit that ain't important in life. All they wants and expectations stem from media hype. Switch your focus, young people. Pick a different path. Free your mind from decisions that can end up your last, you know.
Save me from the stars, save me from the stars, so I can be free, free. Save me from the stars.
That's right.
Save me from the stars.
Free yourself, free your mind. Erase the ignorance,
so I can be free.
Free. See, Mike is willing to risk his freedom to put gifts under the tree. That same desperation could have resulted in somebody's life. It's time we pick apart this system, these holidays, these religions, and ask why. It's time to be the outcast, it's time to rebel. See, the world's gonna continue the war. Ain't gonna stop. We're gonna continue to fight, but we gotta overcome the war within ourselves. And win.
Look at me, look at me and look at you. Niggas in the back trying to still catch up to the level that I took it to. Say a lot for the niggas in the back. One time we can do it like electric boogaloo. We gon' do it for the niggas in the track with your pack, real rap, cause you know how a nigga do. Look at you and look at me. Look at me and look at you. Niggas in the back trying to still catch up to the level that I took it to. Say a lot for the niggas in the back. One time we can do it like electric boogaloo. We can do it for the niggas in the track with your pack, real rap, cause you know how a nigga do. Time and time again, I'ma give 195%. Whenever I decide to vent, getting sucked off right behind the tent. I got a call and a couple shot percent. Rubber extendo, popping in. You niggas faking, I will not pretend. Rubber ballpoint pen, the document. Okay, where do I begin? Wait a minute, your oxygen. Man, I never got the ring like Opposite. If a bitch act up, pop a front. Loot game, everything is top end. Tryna stack more chips to IBM. If you see Hawk smash, it's probably him. Bitch got the chun with the bop pin. If it ain't Lou Phil's not the trend. Man, it's way too much toxicant. Never tried cocaine, it's a boxing. Throw 100 like the George Washington. White chin when you came and try your chin. I'ma fuck around and catch you 5 to 10. With the cowboy boots and slide it in. You can take one look, it's common sense. It's common sense. Look at you and look at me. Look at you and look at me. Look at me and look at you. Look at me and look at you. Niggas in the back tryna still catch up to the level that I took it to. Say a lot for the niggas in the back. One time we can do it like electric boogaloo. We gon' do it for the niggas in the track with the pack, real rap, cause you know how a nigga do. Look at you and look at me. Look at me and look at you. Niggas in the back trying to still catch up to the level that I took it to. Say a lot for the niggas in the back. One time we can do it like electric boogaloo. We can do it for the niggas in the track with your back, real rap. But you know how niggas do. I feel the vibe till my driver bust you. Roll up and I take a puff or two. Ball man, if you mad, then bust a move. And you wonder why I hold them up with you. Never wait for a prostitute to choose. Got a game plan that you won't refuse. They be like, goddamn, with nothing did. I be like, goddamn, what don't I do? They gon' do it why? Cause I told them to. The phone pop and the bill is overdue. You can take it from a kid that broke the rules. I tell these young boys chill, go to school. I got my wrists on chill like frozen food. Got a real bad bitch to hold the pool. Let my Jew boy customize the cars. He gon' take an antique from old to new. From old to new. Look at you and look at me. Look at me and look at you. Niggas in the back trying to still catch up to the level that I took it to. Say a lot for the niggas in the back. One time we can do it like electric boogaloo. We gon' do it for the niggas in the track with your back, real rap. Cause you know how a nigga do. Don't look at you and look at me. Look at me and look at you. Niggas in the back trying to still catch up to the level that I took it to. Yeah, say a lot for the niggas in the back. One time we can do it like electric boogaloo. We can do it for the niggas in the track with your back, real rap. Cause you know how a nigga do. Know how a nigga do.
Wonder.
Yo, this your boy Wafu Malik Star. I'm chilling in the underworld with your boy o.stylez. You know what I'm saying? Where the heat comes from. Y'all need to get up on this. Y'all need to be down with the underworld team. Join the movement. Let's go.
Get 'em! This your boy Mac reppin' 304 Dub V, baby. Get 'em squad, GS all day. And when I want to listen to real hip-hop, I tune into Underworld Radio and hang out with my boy o.stylez, the JFK and Jers, and all my Law fans. Get 'em!
Yeah, what's good, man? It's D.R. Reader, Realist MC, CEO of the Real Entertainment. Shout it out to my man, o.stylez, the underground pioneer, holding it down for Underworld and Underground ENT for this one day.
Yo, it's your dude, Crisis. Giving much love, much respect, and much love to my bro, the pioneer. Beginning and where it's ending.